The balance sheet of the country. By the way, the balance sheet of El Salvador, the country, has hundreds of millions of dollars, close to $1 billion in Bitcoin. They're putting Bitcoin on their reserves, which helps them grow outside of all this fiat money madness. So not only do they use it as day-to-day legal tender, but the country itself has put Bitcoin on their balance sheet. We have an adopting El Salvador passport program. People are sending us $1 million in donation to get a El Salvadoran passport within 2 weeks. And then that money goes into Bitcoin. We've got some other financial architecting that's going on, which is favoring Bitcoin. So that not only is the country have Bitcoin as legal tender, but it'll become a fully reserved Bitcoin country, which means that it'll be potentially the richest country in the world.
Max Keiser, a veteran Bitcoin maximalist, emphasized life-changing improvements since El Salvador's approach to integrating Bitcoin into its national economy. He explains that the country has strategically accumulated close to $1 billion in Bitcoin, which is now a part of its national reserves. This bold move is focused on enhancing El Salvador's economic growth while avoiding the volatility and restrictions that are associated with traditional fiat currencies. This initiative not only attracts foreign investments, but also strengthens the country's financial stability by boosting its Bitcoin holdings. Keiser emphasizes that this method is part of a broader financial architecture that heavily favors Bitcoin. Lastly, Keiser envisions El Salvador becoming the world's first fully Bitcoin-reserved country, a groundbreaking change that could potentially transform it into one of the wealthiest nations. We will now bring you clips of Max Keiser as he shares more of his insights about Bitcoin and El Salvador. Give this video a like and subscribe to the channel to show your support. Make sure to stick around until the end of the video as Max Keiser discusses the future of money. Thanks and enjoy.
El Salvador is solving a big problem for America on the southern border. You know, their southern border is out of control. And they look at El Salvador and they notice that less and less Salvadorans are making the trip north. So they're actually loving President Bukele because he's helping them with a big problem that they have at the southern border. And they are now rooting for other countries to do the same, to follow in the Bukele model, and this would stem the number of migrants who are crossing the southern border. Number two, to your point, it is a struggle. You know, we are dealing with the IMF. So the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, is, John Perkins wrote about this in his Confessions of an Economic Hitman, which he worked for the bankers and the IMF. And when a Southern American country or Central American country did something that the bankers on Wall Street didn't like, they would send in the economic hitman, and they would, in fact, throw him out of an airplane, the leader of that country, et cetera. And the history is replete with examples of this. It's not debated. This is exactly what they do and have been done. Today, we've got the IMF fulfilling that role. It's trying to get as many countries in the world to get on the U.S. dollar. Donald Trump said last week that he's going to go after countries that stop using the dollar. And so they're very nervous. They're very nervous about the fact that the dollar is losing world reserve currency. There's nothing they can do about it. But, with the IMF, President Bukele has pretty much gone toe to toe, let's say, with the IMF. And he's in the process now of exiting the IMF. So the economy is growing sufficiently without the IMF's help. Thank you very much. The balance sheet of the country. By the way, the balance sheet of El Salvador, the country, has hundreds of millions of dollars, close to $1 billion in Bitcoin. They're putting Bitcoin on their reserves, which helps them grow outside of all this fiat money madness. So not only do they use it as day-to-day legal tender, but the country itself has put Bitcoin on their balance sheet. We have an adopting El Salvador passport program. People are sending us $1 million in donation to get a El Salvadoran passport within 2 weeks. And then that money goes into Bitcoin. We've got some other financial architecting that's going on, which is favoring Bitcoin. So that not only is the country have Bitcoin as legal tender, but it'll become a fully reserved Bitcoin country, which means that it'll be potentially the richest country in the world, because all these other countries are going to die into fiat money madness. They're all throwing this. Let me tell you, El Salvador is the next Singapore. The GDP here is going to triple in the next 5, 6, 7 years. This is the place to be, Jimmy. The U.S. is a fucking shithole. I mean, if you want to waste your time in that godforsaken hellhole, have at it. But if you want to be part of the revolution where people are optimistic and building the future and there's economic freedom and freedom of speech, there's only one country in the world, and that's El Salvador. Get on a plane, come on down here. We'll set you up with a podcast. We got a beautiful studio. Taste freedom. I will baptize you in the Pacific Ocean and turn you into a Bitcoin maximalism. I have that role here. I'm the high priest of Bitcoin in El Salvador, and I will baptize you in the waters of the Pacific and Bitcoin Beach, and you will start, you and Steph, a future of optimism and leave that godforsaken, fentanyl, rattled, idle shithole behind, Jimmy.
Keiser dives into the disordered and contentious relationship between El Salvador and the IMF. He references John Perkins's Confessions of an Economic Hitman to illustrate how the IMF has historically manipulated economies to maintain control, often through coercive means. However, Bukele's administration is taking a bold stance by distancing itself from the IMF. El Salvador is growing its economy independently, notably through the integration of Bitcoin into its financial system. Keiser is optimistic about El Salvador's future, comparing its potential to that of Singapore's rapid economic rise. He invites people to join this revolution of financial freedom and innovation. With that being said, here are more clips of Max Keiser as he explains his bullish outlook on both Bitcoin and El Salvador.
I think in America, when you see outcry about money being sent to Ukraine, for example, well, the government prints the money. I mean, then no one's going to stop them. They can print it and ship it to Ukraine. Now, what we're seeing now is that, of course, all that money ends up causing inflation, and then the inflation is bankrupting the middle class, and people are outraged, and they say, stop sending money to Ukraine. But to get more to the point, they should be protesting about getting rid of fiat money and adopting Bitcoin, as we do in El Salvador, and you too can enjoy the Salvadoran miracle. It's a circular Bitcoin economy. It's all in Bitcoin. I mean, you can just use Bitcoin your entire life in El Salvador if you want. The adoption rate is increasing every month, every year, but if you can do it now. So in Bitcoin Beach, my friend Mike Peterson of Bitcoin Beach, he started the Bitcoin revolution in El Zonte, El Salvador, and the circular economy in El Zonte by giving all the pupusa sellers and everybody in town some free Bitcoin. And they said, just transact in Bitcoin, because the surfers that were arriving in El Zonte, they had different currencies from different countries, and there was no way for the local business people to accept that foreign money. And they don't take credit cards, and they're unbanked. So these guys would have to go 20 miles down the road to an ATM and try to get cash, and it was very cumbersome. But on a Bitcoin standard, it doesn't matter where you come from, or any country, any currency. If you have a Bitcoin, you can transact because the local commercial people take Bitcoin, and it's an instantaneous transaction, and there's nobody who's going to stop them. The center of freedom has moved from the U.S. to El Salvador. So this is what I'm telling people: leave the U.S. because it's sucking hind tit. The U.S. is now at the back of the queue. They're no longer the shining city on the hill. It's a fucking zoned out, fentanyl addicted, homeless person, on the parking lot dying from, whatever. That's like the U.S. is now the place to leave. It's a shithole. It's the banana republic. When the President Bukele gave his recent speech to CPAC, he was talking about inflation in the U.S. and how America is now monetizing their own debt. America prints money to buy its own debt because nobody else in the world wants to buy American debt. It's called debt monetization. And back 50 years ago, people in the U.S. would look at Central America and say, ha ha, you have to buy your own debt. You're a banana republic. And so here you have the president of El Salvador lecturing people in Washington at CPAC about the fact that you guys are now monetizing your own debt. I suggested to the president, as the Bitcoin advisor to the president, that he should include a line in CPAC that said, "Who's the banana republic now, bitch?" But he opted not to use that phraseology, sadly. I think it would have gone viral. But like everything I've suggested to the president so far in my 2 years here, he has pretty much rejected every one of my suggestions. But nevertheless, I keep trying. He hates corruption. And he's told the attorney general to investigate every minister in the country for any corruption or wrongdoing. And if he finds any, put him in jail. because it's a drag on the economy and it's not good for the country. And the people that gave him an 87% vote in the last election, just a few months ago, this is what they demand. President Bukele serves the people. The people want no more corruption. So he's going to get rid of anybody who is corrupt.
I mean,
he got rid of the
crazy.
gangsters. Well, I mean, all he does is all day long. I mean, I've had the pleasure of spending some time with him and talking to him a little bit. And, he is a guy who all he does 24 hours a day is think about how to improve the country. And he looks at every single detail. I was at a dinner not too long ago, and he was talking about the restrooms at the airport needed to be cleaner. And I'm like, what? 10 minutes before that, he was talking about a $1 billion bond offering. And then he segues right into the details of what people experience at the airport. And this is the mind of like a Steve Jobs meets JFK, right? He's a JFK. He's about energizing people to do something for their country. And at the same time, he's like Steve Jobs, where he can keep 10,000 details in his head and just execute as an executive so many brilliant things, like just changing the tourist visa from 90 days to 180 days. So now suddenly all that tourist money is here for twice as long. That's an easy fix. He did it in a day. He had the idea, he changed it. The next day it was changed. So he's just like rapid fire going through this enormous list of tasks to do, and he's getting things done. Infrastructure, roads, everything is done. He's getting it all done.
What do you think about Max Keiser's perspective on El Salvador's Bitcoin integration? What do you think about the concept of a fully Bitcoin reserved country? Share your thoughts in the comments section. If you found today's video informative and would like to receive more insights and updates on cryptocurrency and global finance, please consider liking the video, subscribing to our channel, and enabling post notifications. Be sure to stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll uncover more about the fascinating developments in the crypto space. Until then, keep questioning, keep exploring, and most importantly, keep investing wisely. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.